now.
I can't hear anybody now.
Can you hear me?
Hello?
There we go.
Okay. Is he on?
I'm on.
Okay, there we are.
Levels all good?
Okay, here we go. We're coming on. I'm going to start sending you music right now.
Okay.
It's staff and management.
Welcome to Take Back Your Health. Your hosts are Dr. Sunil Pai and Maureen Sutton, who will explain the shocking truths about healthcare, prescription drugs, food and supplement industries. They will help guide you to take back your power and feel great again. Now, here's Dr. Sunil Pai and Maureen Sutton.
Welcome, everybody, today. Today is an important day because we're going to talk to one of our great colleagues and friends here in this world of integrative medicine on our show, Take Back Your Health, Dr. Zach Bush. Today, we're going to talk about important ideas and concepts, which I've mentioned in my book, An Inflammation Nation, but Zach will take it even further with some solutions that we can talk about with restoring our GI function and restoring our microbiome due to glyphosate toxicity. So before we get started, Maureen, why don't you do a little introduction to Zach, to the listeners?
Okay, I'd love to. Zach?
Hi there.
Zach Bush, MD, is triple board certified physician and with expertise in internal medicine, endocrinology, metabolism, and hospice palliative care. The breakthrough science Dr. Bush and his colleagues have delivered offer profound insights into human health and longevity. In 2012, he discovered a family of carbon-based redox molecules made by bacteria. He and his team subsequently demonstrated that the cellular communication network functions to compensate for glyphosate and many other dietary, chemical, and pharmaceutical toxins that disrupt our body's natural defense systems. This science has resulted in a revolutionary class of dietary supplements, including the product Restore. His educational outreach efforts provide grassroots foundation from which ultimately upshift consumer behavior to bring about radical change in the mega industries of big farming, big pharma, and Western medicine at large. His website is www.zachbushmd.com, and his product can be found at www.restore4life.com.
Welcome, Zach. One thing I'm really excited about is that you're evidence-based. The show that we have here, Take Back Your Health, is completely evidence-based. I want you to bring in the listeners to first explain a little bit about your background and what led you to understand this whole glyphosate relationship with our microbiome and our health.
Sure. Thank you for having me on. It's an important show. You guys are functioning as kind of the front lines of public health education. We appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The background story of how we got to today was certainly not linear, certainly myself, but I think looking back through history, it's pretty rare to find somebody who's intelligent enough to create a paradigm shift prospectively. I think paradigm shifts always happen by accident, and that's certainly what happened in our labs here in Virginia in 2012. So I had started a nutrition clinic in 2010 and was working to employ a massive range of intense dietary and nutritional regimens to get my patients with chronic disease to find their health again and root back into their intrinsic nature of healing. And in that journey, we were seeing a lot of patients fail early on. So we saw a good 30 to 40% of our patients eating some of the healthiest foods on the planet: kale, cilantro, parsley, superfoods that have decades of data behind them as to be anti-inflammatory, pro-health, anti-cancer, etc. And we saw these patients consuming these foods and getting worse, inflammation markers going up, more bloating, more brain fog. Just didn't read the textbook on how food is supposed to work. And that was the beginning of our big kind of root cause questions of where is our understanding of nutrition? For me, it was totally elementary because I had gone through a big allopathic training, and in those 17 years of education, had never really learned anything about nutrition. I had one semester course at the beginning of medical school, the very first year, that was called nutrition. And it was basically memorizing the food pyramid.
Right, which is really sad. And by the way, it's still being taught incorrectly. So go ahead, continue.
Yeah, I think it is exactly right. It has not evolved over the last 20 years. So that was the status of affairs. I had started a nutrition clinic with the goal of really learning nutrition, delved into a lot of books over the last 20, 30 years, but they weren't answering the question as to why are our patients today not tolerating healthiest foods on planet. And so that took us down, number one, a trust pathway. A big transformation as a healer and a physician is to begin to trust your patients. And there's an inherent mistrust built into the patient-provider relationship today that I think is fundamental in the flaws and some of the weakness in our overall Western medicine approach to health and disease.
And how doctors speak to their patients.
Exactly. And
vice versa. And, patients not telling their doctor everything because that trust level is not there.
That's exactly right. And so you see that situation where in my case, I'm teaching nutrition. I see the wrong outcomes. The immediate first, training that we have is assume non-compliance. Assume your patient is screwing it up. Assume they're not doing what you told them to do. And that's a pretty easy thing to assume because, frankly, me as a doctor, I'm a terrible patient, right? I rarely do what my doctor tells me. And so, it's a pretty easy jump to make in a lot of ways. But when somebody's got an acute illness, it's hard to really rationalize how dedicated they can get to this process. And, it took me a couple of years of doing the nutrition education to find out that my patients were literally eating healthier than I was. They were not only doing what I was asking them to do, they were going above and beyond that. They were doing their own research in nutrition. Right. They were bringing new tools and resources to the table. And once you get that kind of humility built in, then you start to get the opportunity to actually ask the root cause questions that we started to ask, which was, have the plants inherently changed since the 1960s, when the nutrition science around cancer was really started in earnest? And the answer, of course, was the plants have changed dramatically since the 1940s, especially, but certainly since the 1960s, and really dramatically just in the last 20 years, since the late 1990s, we've had this massive transformation of what food is and what it's allowed to be called. The classic thing where Taco Bell can't call their meat anymore because it's actually soy protein and things like that. So you just don't know what's going in your mouth anymore because our definition of food has gotten so bizarre.
Yeah, I remember Sunil and I were in a store and we saw something on the shelf that was called Wonder. It used to be called Wonder Bread, but it's not called bread anymore. It's just Wonder, and so you wonder what the heck is in
definition
there.
Of a bread, which we wouldn't eat anyways, right? But anyways, it's just interesting how food is changing, and now it's so processed, so much chemicals, so much preservatives, so much non-real food in there that now we wonder. So continue on with your talking about how did you discover this link between what you were doing with your research and how that affected, the patients or in the animal studies,
Sure. So, the initial questions were, are the micronutrients and macronutrients in the food different than where they were when Colin Campbell and a lot of these masters in the nutrition field, started doing their work? And it was obvious. I mean, you can just pick up any food science journal and find out that a tomato that's on the shelf today that's grown hydroponically has almost no detectable lycopene, which was the largest detectable trace micronutrient that was really killing cancer in a tomato back in the day. And so we've had this dramatic change in the nutrient quality of the food. And so going down that avenue, we started to ask, well, if it's not in the plant, it must not be in the soil. And that was the first time I'd kind of turned my attention to soil. This was 2012. One of my close colleagues, William Vitalis, brought in a white paper on soil science that was 90 pages long. And I was dumbfounded on a couple levels. One, I had never seen a 90-page white paper. And number two, I couldn't believe it was done on soil.
Right.
So, that kind of aha moment was, oh my gosh, here I'm studying nutrition, yet I have no clue what the substrate is that we grow this food in and how it may be related to human health.
Right. That's something we always tell our patients too is, well, where does what you're eating eat? What does it come from? What's giving it nutrition.
I mean, we've been pushing a plant-based practice and plant-based diet since 2009. We're kind of late bloomers to the Colin Campbell field and whatnot. But we also started to notice the same thing, which you probably noticed, is that even when patients were eating healthy, and we've been doing allergy testing, microbiome testing for about 15 years, but we've even seen the changes in our patients' profiles in which their guts are now off. There's more leaky gut, which you talk about very well, and more importantly, the food allergies kind of exploded off the. It used to be just one or two things. Now it's like 25 things on like almost everything, and even wonderful things like kale or spinach or superfoods are there.
And
so
people freaking out. What am I going to eat? I'm allergic to everything.
And so there's always this underlying triggering mechanism cause, and continue with how you discovered some of that link being glyphosate.
Yeah. So again, at that moment, we were starting to look at the soil, and about page 40 on that white paper was this huge depiction of a molecule, large carbon hexagons, look like honeycombs, and then hanging off these was a two-dimensional depiction of a three-dimensional molecule that just had the right moment in my life. Up until that time, before I left the university in 2010, I'd been doing chemotherapy research, and my area of expertise was in mitochondrial metabolism, mitochondrial control of something called apoptosis, which is programmed cell suicide. And I'd gotten kind of infamous in my little circle globally around this little subject because I'd figured out that there was some vitamin A compounds that could turn on apoptosis through these mitochondrial pathways, which is unique in tumors because that means that a tumor can kill itself devoid of any immune system in the host.
Interesting.
So it's an exciting kind of new paradigm in our understanding of how we might approach cancer in the future. So that with that background, I saw this molecule and suddenly recognized that the three-dimensional structure sitting in this soil molecule looked a heck of a lot like the chemotherapy agents that I had been working with. And that was a major goosebump moment of, wow, we've been looking for thousands of years to the plants and the herbals and everything else since Chinese medicine, 9,000 years ago started or whatever. We've had this huge history of it, but so few of us have ever considered that maybe all that medicine starts in the dirt. And so to see the possibility that these oxygen, hydrogen molecules that are called redox molecules might exist outside the human cell was a major paradigm shift for me.
Wonderful. So
that then took us down to this amazing moment where within a couple of weeks of that, trying to figure out how those molecules ended up in soil, we found out that they were from bacteria and fungi. The microbiome literally making these guys as a metabolite or a breakdown product of their effort to make nutrient available, your macronutrients like protein, carbohydrates, etc., your protein and building blocks like your amino acids, and then your micronutrients, things like selenium, manganese, calcium, these nutrients you expect to get your food. For your food to turn into something that's going to be usable by your liver and the cells beyond, your microbiome has to do a huge amount of processing or metabolism. And in that process, the exhaust, if you will, from that burning process of your food produces these carbon molecules out. At that moment was a really important thing that would eventually lead us to the glyphosate question that you're asking, which is, how has this molecule become fundamentally missing in our gut, let alone the soil? Because ultimately our gut is supposed to look like the finest organic soil on earth, right? We're supposed to have incredibly rich, processes of fungi and bacteria and yeast all working together to create this incredibly, nutrient-rich resource for us to stick our roots in. Our roots are literally the villi of our intestines that root into this soil, and we should be absorbing all of that nutrient. So what happened to that?
So Zach, why don't we hold off on that thought right now? We'll be right back after these commercial break, and then we'll talk about this wonderful redox molecule, glyphosate, and actually more importantly, solutions on how you can restore your GI function.
Okay, you're clear.
Thanks.
All right, we're on Facebook Live, guys, and we're here with Zach Bush. Great person here who's done a lot of work. It's key because this follows everything that we've been talking about in my book over the last couple of years in Inflammation Nation, the microbiome being tied to everything that's causing dysfunction. And Zach is an important person because he's actually talking about the evidence of glyphosate, which we've mentioned in my book, which is key because now more doctors, more scientists and researchers are actually coming together and having this global discussion on something that is universally, unfortunately, affecting all of us. And so this is quite an exciting discussion because the more people that we talk about this, it's a global aspect.
Yeah, we all need to wake up and be aware of what we're putting in our mouths. Why are we so sick? Why do so many people have cancer? I remember hearing Zach on, I don't know, something that it was a talk with Jeffrey Smith. And as I heard you explaining all of this chemistry and everything, I was thinking, oh my gosh, Sunil needs to meet Zach because the two of you speak the same language. So I'm glad that you're here together.
And what I think is great is that this discussion is coming from so many different angles now, right? So we get someone like Jeffrey Smith, who's kind of on the GMO front as an advocate, and then you're coming from the studies and the science in the animal model and the tight junctions in the gut, and then here we've been talking about inflammation, plant-based diets, immune system function, and just overall, steps for integrative health. And so it's nice because when they all come together, then that message is heard, I think, stronger.
20 seconds.
Than one person.
Absolutely. Well, we sure appreciate the macro communication you guys are getting out there, certainly the books and the radio programs and everything else. If we're doing micro communication down at the cell level, then we sure as heck better be doing the macro communication between the humans at the top. So
All right.
Exactly.
That's right.
You are tuned in to Take Back Your Health. To reach our program today, call 1-866-472-5792. That's 1-866-472-5792. Or by email to radio@sanjevani.net. That's radio@sanjevani.net. Now, let's return to Take Back Your Health.
Welcome, everybody, and we're here with Dr. Zach Bush, and we were right in the discussion of understanding a redox molecule that you discovered, and go ahead and continue on where we're at.
Fantastic. Yeah, so the realization that bacteria and fungi were making this complex family of molecules, and each species of bacteria and fungi, by the way, seem to make their own subset. So one species may make 5 or 10 of these variants, and then you look at 5 million species of fungi and a couple 100,000 species of parasites and tens of thousands of species of bacteria. You start very quickly getting to millions of different variants of this carbon molecule that we had seen in the soil science. And in that realization of this apoptosis story, or programmed cell suicide, in which the mitochondria, which live inside of our cells, create this huge wireless network, if you will, of communication that allows the inside of the cell to know where the repairs are needed, what repair supplies are needed where, how to traffic them to and fro, etc. And so that reality of the mitochondria running the inside of the cell with this communication network, nobody to any of our reading had ever looked outside of the cell to say, how does the outside of the human cell communicate? When you're in that extracellular matrix between the cells, which is a huge volume of our body, obviously, what's talking out there? Because the mitochondrial redox doesn't exist out there. And then bigger question is, how does the redox environment look inside of a gut where you have no human cells that are really capable of participating through that redox signaling? And the obvious answer is these bacteria and fungi would pick up the slack because they don't have mitochondria. Only the multicellular organisms like the worms and the mammals, et cetera, are going to have mitochondria. And so these single-celled organisms like the bacteria, the fungi, and the plants, even though they're multicellular, they don't have that classic mitochondria. And so they're going to have to build some sort of communication network that's not only stable outside of cells, can also talk across species. And this is very exciting because it starts to kind of speak to the singularity of biology itself. It doesn't matter if you're human or bacteria or fungi, you're going to have to be in communication with the world around you. Isolation is the end of health. Isolation is, by definition, a cancer cell. And that can happen in any species, in any cell type. You can get that isolation leading to cancer. And I think that's an interesting caveat, actually, for the human side of here we are talking about building bigger walls around our nation and growing up, more metal detectors in our schools.
Right.
And, all of this, you start to do isolation to any human species or any human subgroup, you're going to get a cancer growing.
Right. And I think one of your previous interviews, you were talking about, taking even animals, for example, from Africa, in their terrain and then putting them in a zoo. Same thing with how we are itself, so even taking our food away from where it was traditionally grown. Anytime we start changing the environment, we're changing even the epigenetics of what makes even that tomato. so it will have less lycopene. So at the end of the day, what did your research show? Because I do have the article, and I was just looking it up the other day and looking at, but explain to the listeners how and what did it show in terms of glyphosate and the tight junctions? Because, in my book, I always talk about, and we've had episodes talking about gut microbiome, and that's the entry point of everything, good, bad, and anything in between, whether it's a drug, whether it's a supplement, whether it's food. If that tight junctions, if that gut barrier is leaky or damaged or inflamed due to environmental toxins, due to antibiotics, alcohol, stress, you name it, glyphosate in your case, which we'll talk about, then a trigger of inflammatory reactions occur that goes systemically and dysfunctions occur. So what did the research show?
So our PhD in biochemistry and cell biology, John Gilday, was a brilliant man, and he did some of our first cell culture experiments looking at the small intestine and colon and the renal tubule cells of the human, and the rodent models as well. And what we were seeing is, as soon as you took a complex formula or variety of these carbon molecules from the bacteria and fungi and put them into the human system, you saw a huge increase in protein synthesis of the extracellular matrix, the outside of the cell environment, suddenly going into a rapid construction, repair, bolstering up the defenses without any information at all. We weren't telling the cells to do anything. This is a very passive redox environment where the supplementation of these molecules from bacteria and fungi don't tell the human cells to don't do anything. But what it does is it amplifies any request from a nearby signal. So think of your cell phone, for example, when we're talking about cell communication here. So your phone's got a receiver and transmitter in it that works all the time. But if you're further than 7 miles from your closest cell phone tower, you have no reception, and the thing is useless as a communication device. And in its isolation, it will start to fragment its software. It won't be able to update your information. You're starting to fall out of touch with what's going around. You don't know where to pick up your kids. The whole community starts to break down. That's exactly what's happening on the communication level in the human cell environment. When we start to lack this extracellular communication network, we start to get a paucity of construction and communication and bypass and interstate, pathways for transport across cell structures and everything else. All of that infrastructure starts to collapse outside the cells when you're lacking this communication network.
And what is disrupting that communication network is glyphosate.
Yeah,
one of the things.
Yeah, so one of the main things is actually just a lack of bacteria and fungi, right? So you lose microbiome, you're going to lose the extracellular communication network that they produce. And so a course of antibiotics, extremely potent at wiping this out. And if you look at the CDC map of our cancer death around the United States, and then look at physician prescriptions for antibiotics state by state, and you'll see a perfect correlation. The more prescriptions per person or per population that we prescribe, the higher likelihood of death by cancer.
And we know that even just one antibiotic can cause GI dysfunction up to 18 months later. And we need the antibiotics because we do surgeries, we have infections. But what we don't know is how the long-term ramifications that's affecting where 70-80% of our immune cells in the gut are responding to, and that chronicity of people now just getting a Z-Pak every month for their sinus infection, or getting their Cipro or whatever for a UTI. This constant barrage of destruction that's happening.
But there's more than that too. I personally had cancer, and since I was 12 years old, I was eating organic foods. I was mostly vegetarian, did yoga every single day. I lived like the perfect lifestyle to make sure that I never got sick. Wham, one day I have cancer. So there's something bigger going on.
And I think some of these things so tell the listeners a little bit about what glyphosate is.
Yeah.
And then how is that actually disrupting those tight junctions or the GI barrier?
So glyphosate would be known to the consumer and the listener here as the most common ingredient, or the main ingredient in the common weed killer that is called Roundup. And that's, of course, historically produced by a company named Monsanto, but that's become infamous in the media now. But in fact, it went off patent in 2007, and all the chemical companies in the U.S. make glyphosate, and frankly, the vast majority of glyphosate made worldwide is coming out of China now. And so this chemical is being made all over the world, and the chemical is interesting in that it's built on the backbone of a really important amino acid, which is a building block for proteins in your body. It's called glycine. and they tag on a phosphate group on the end of this thing, and then a little methyl group on the other, and you get this methylphosphate chemical that's called glyphosate. And glyphosate is in a family of molecules or chemicals called organophosphates that were made famous by the Agent Orange compounds.
Right.
So you remember Agent Orange in Vietnam,
Right.
they were dumping on the jungles to wipe out everything green.
Right.
They were killing the foliage. That was causing, skin cancers and weird immune dysfunction in our soldiers almost on contact. So they knew that one was not going to work for a food chain. So they were looking for something a little less toxic than Agent Orange when they were looking in these organophosphates. And they found this molecule that was patented by a Japanese researcher way back in 1959, did not put it on the market out of concern for what this thing was capable of. And one of the concerns about this specific organophosphate is that it's very water soluble. A water-soluble chemical or toxin is a bit of a disaster in a globe or Earth that is 70% water.
Water. Exactly.
Yeah, and spraying it on plants that you're watering, and it's going.
70%, plants are 70% water. So you got water everywhere. We are a water planet, and we created a chemical that would integrate into that entire ecosystem. And so what we are seeing now, if you fast forward from 1976 when the chemical debuted in our food chain to 1996 when it became a direct food additive by being a crop treatment when we went to genetically modified Roundup ready crops, down to 2016 where we have our most recent public health data, is that we've now dumping somewhere around 4.5 billion pounds of this single chemical worldwide.
Wow.
4.5 billion pounds is catastrophically logarithmically larger number than is the pounds of antibiotics that we prescribe both to humans. We only prescribe about 8 million pounds of antibiotics to humans in this country. We prescribe another 30 million pounds to our animals in our food chain. So that's 38 million versus 4.5 billion pounds. And so it's just, this logarithmically huge number. And the interesting thing about glyphosate in regard to this antibiotic story and the death of the microbiome is that it's never been patented as a weed killer. That's what we're told.
It's really interesting, right?
It's been patented as an antibiotic, an anti-parasite, antifungal. It kills single-celled organisms that it touches, and obviously kills plants that haven't been genetically modified to handle them. And so you've got this incredible antimicrobial that's being dumped on Earth at 4.5 billion pounds, killing microbiome in the soil, in our waterways, in our oceans, in our coral. It's creating dead zones wherever it goes. And if you look at the population of the United States, you can see there's a literal dead zone happening in our southern states.
Right. And one of the things that in my book, I bring out same thing on the glyphosate, that in the Journal of Organic Systems, that they showed about a statistical correlation to 22 diseases since the introduction. That's like 0.000001 statistically significant diseases that are correlated to this link of adding glyphosate into the food supply. And it's because of this gut microbiome dysfunction. So after this short break, what we'll do is we'll actually get into the really heart and soul of this discussion of understanding that now that we understand glyphosate is bad for us, what can we do to help improve, and strengthen us, and more importantly, repair our body, because we've all been exposed to these things and we all have some kind of gut dysfunction. So stay tuned, and after this break, we'll be right back with solutions.
You're clear.
Okay, so everybody on Facebook, I just want to let you know, this is we're talking with Zach Bush, and he's got this product called Restore. We'll be talking about it in the next section. We also want to be thankful to our sponsors, for the Glucan 300. This is a polysaccharide. It has been studied in vitro and in vivo against about 45 to 50 different beta-glucan products, and it's been shown to be the most potent available, even stronger than PSK Crestin, which is a prescription drug in Japan. And so, again, evidence-based here. And we also want to thank our other sponsor, Pure Black, which is a mineral pitch, which we'll talk on our next show, which is called Shilajit, similar to some of the humic acid that's in Restore, but different actions and mechanisms of how that will help everyone.
Oh, and with the Restore, there's also a nasal spray that I use daily. I love it. I think it works great.
So we'll talk about, when we're on the show, we'll talk about a variety of aspects of how to use it or what the daily recommendations would be. Anything else you want to talk about?
Oh, there's so much to talk about.
I could talk with Zach all day because he's just like me. We could just talk all night. It's good. But everybody should understand that this is really super important, because as we're looking at, recommending a whole foods, organic, plant-based diet, anti-inflammatory diet, like he mentioned before, many people will say, hey, I've tried this, I've been juicing, I've been eating some healthy greens, and I still have issues, because you really have to seek organic foods. You really want to get rid of all these excess chemicals that are in the environment, glyphosate being one of them. But it's really important. Otherwise, we're sabotaging and we're not getting the bang for the buck, as we would say, or the nutrient-dense foods, because we're not able to absorb, assimilate, and excrete appropriately.
Yeah, and I've been eating organic foods, like I said, since 12 years old. I got into health foods then. And I was like, okay, so why do I still feel sick? I'm eating organic
All right, here we go, guys. Coming back.
Okay. We'll talk about that later.
To take back your health. To reach our program today, call 1-866-472-5792. That's 1-866-472-5792. Or by email to radio@sanjevani.net. That's radio@sanjevani.net. Now, let's return to Take Back Your Health.
Okay, we're back. We're talking an important topic calling glyphosate, which is one of these gut disruptors, as we know, that's sprayed on billions of pounds of this everywhere on our foods. That's why we're trying to remember always eating as much organic, non-GMO foods. You can also see Zach on the internet, he's at zachbushmd.com, and his other websites. There's a lot of interviews, so if you want to learn about GMOs and other things like that, the discussion can go on and on. But let's now talk about, since we know that there's 22 diseases that glyphosate has been kind of correlated strongly to, and in your studies, you showed that it was disrupting the tight junctions, meaning more leaky gut. That means more inflammation, more dysfunction. What did you then look to how to restore that or actually repair that?
Yeah, so the direct toxicity of glyphosate is interesting, that it destroys tight junctions, which are proteins that are like Velcro that hold your cells together in coherent bundles of membranes or barrier systems. And it's important to realize that that's not just your gut. Leaky gut got famous and has had a good PR team, I think, with it. But the fact is those membranes run all over your body, your endovascular system, the blood vessels, both veins and arteries throughout your whole system are tied together with the same tight junction proteins. Same with your blood-brain barrier.
Absolutely.
Your brain is tied together with tight junctions. So the fact that glyphosate ends up being a tight junction toxin is pretty alarming, because it's really breaking down not just the boundaries between you and the outside world, which is, of course, leading to this huge phenomenon you talked about, which is everybody's sensitive to everything they're eating now.
Right.
You get a food sensitivity or food allergy panel, you're basically going to show up at least half of the foods that you're eaten in the last 90 days are going to show up on there. Not because you're necessarily directly allergic to them, but you're like leaking uncontrolled amounts of metabolites and breakdown products of those foods right into your immune system, which lies right behind that gut lining. So now you get into this chronic inflammatory state. And so we knew that we were going to have to somehow bolster up this whole system with an increase in this wireless communication network from the microbiome. And the challenge, of course, is how do we get that microbiome back? Because probiotics are kind of spitting in the wind. You got 2 species or 4 species of bacteria. You're never going to mimic millions of different species in the bacteria, fungi, et cetera, that are going to repair that microbiome, create a coherent communication network. And so it's clear that we were going to have to look to the soil, not to the human gut at this point, to recover that kind of data or communication network. And so we were going down into the fossil soil, thinking that, if it's possible that the fossil soil can actually be liberated, these molecules, and then we can figure out how to get them turned back on, then we could solve the problem. And so that's what we did. So we started taking soil extracts from fossil layers of soil that are about 50 to 60 million years old. And unfortunately, they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything to, you mentioned shilajit, humic acid, these compounds, we pull them out. They can deliver great mineral content, but they don't do any of this wireless communication network. So it was an issue of getting it back into our labs and figuring out how to get the hydrogen oxygen exchange to get back alive again, like it would have been millions of years ago when it was produced by the bacteria and the fungi. Once that happened, it was really obvious under a microscope, because suddenly all the cells transformed. We now see routinely every day in our labs things happen in human cell culture that have never been witnessed in any university lab in the world, because all the science we've ever done on human science has been isolated. Imagine everything we know about cancer, everything we know about heart disease, etc., has been done in a sterile petri dish. We do not understand human biology and its power to heal until you add back in this microbial life.
Right. And exactly, one thing that we see is that a lot of people are looking at now like IV therapies, and I've been kind of like not so sure. Giving nutrients IVs is key for health, because what we're looking at is the microbiome is how it's not only the absorption of the direct nutrient into the system, but it's also turning on a cascade of pathways. So it's not just like, so if someone takes bosmeric, for example, our natural anti-inflammatory, we're not just looking at a curcuminoid going into the blood. We're looking at transfers of thousands of upregulations and downregulations of systems because of the microbiome turning on and off certain things. So it's key that we restore that function and eat properly, and not just try to say, hey, well, we can just kind of bypass the microbiome by putting something in an IV bag.
Absolutely right. I would completely agree with that. I definitely went into my research with this Western medicine IV mentality. I was doing IV Restore for a while, and I do not recommend doing that.
Wow.
As a true scientist, we all do our own experiments on ourselves. So I appreciate that.
And so, doing an IV myself, I was confused why I wasn't seeing the results that I was expecting to see. Right. And then, of course, started taking it orally, which is, of course, where the bacteria and fungi would have made the stuff. Right. And then suddenly the whole doors blew off our understanding. So you're absolutely right. If you don't include the bacterial microbiome, fungi, and everything else in your understanding and perspective on nutrition, you're going to keep missing the boat. If you keep thinking, for example, that what's on your plate is in regard to its macronutrients is what's getting into your body, you're wrong. It's night and day compared to what goes in your body. We keep, as endocrinologists, I'm an endocrinologist, so we treat things like osteoporosis and a lot of hormone-related diseases. In osteoporosis, we're treating the bone, we think, which is made largely of calcium and phosphate and other things. And so we've been telling patients for 50 years, drink more dairy because it's got lots of calcium. It'll strengthen your bones. But in reality, every study we've ever done in endocrinology has shown there's no benefit to oral calcium and bone density. In fact, it looks like the more calcium we take, the worse the bones get. And so that's we just deleted out the whole microbiome, and we just assumed, that plate is for me. No, that plate of food is for your biome.
Right. And so you developed a product called Restore, and explain exactly what that ingredient is, and how is that different than many other products that are out there that have similar type humic or fulvic acids.
Absolutely. So Shilajit is probably the oldest one. You mentioned you're going to do Shilajit maybe in your next segment. Yeah. And so Shilajit is the oldest kind of extract, and it's just raw mineral. It's like peat moss almost. It's like this black mineral substrate, very oxidative. And so it needs to be taken in extremely low doses, needs to ideally be taken with a meal because it's very oxidative. It will rust your gut lining, if you will, or rust the kidney tubules. It can be very toxic to kidney tubules if it's taken in any sort of dosing. And so you want to be very careful with a raw mineral like that. But great from that substrate. Then you get down into humic acid, which was kind of the next substrate. And humic acid is a great carrier of lots of minerals, but it also has what's been touted as kind of this chelation effect, where it can start to grab other molecules out of your gut that may be untoward or unwanted. And so there's a little bit of a chelation process there. Fulvic acid then is kind of the smallest of the previous ones that we were dealing with. Fulvic has less mineral than either the humic or especially the Shilajit. But fulvic acid, again, is very oxidative, damages renal tubules, doesn't do any of this cell-cell communication stuff that we see with protein synthesis and mitochondrial stuff and everything else. And so those are the historic things where we were just trying to just pull out of that raw material. Now, instead, we're trying to go after this oxygen and hydrogen molecules on the ends of these things and get those into this balanced state so that there is no oxidation. We're actually looking for a balanced redox state, which means reduction, which is the donation of electron, and oxidation, which is the absorption of an electron. And so you want these chemical processes, even in a single molecule of the stuff in Restore, to be both donating and absorbing electrons to freely keep this communication chain going. Redox signaling, this intrinsic wireless communication network in your body, is literally chains of electrons flowing through your body. It's very much like a liquid circuit board, if you'd imagine that, where electricity and electrons are flowing out through tissue, being transferred from one oxygen to the next by the release and absorption of a hydrogen molecule. And so that's what we've done with Restore, is we've gotten these ancient soil extracts, put them back into an oxygen-hydrogen exchange state where you can get this active exchange of information across distances. We've now shown definitively that Restore is the first compound to be talking directly to the mitochondria inside your cells. If your cell is really damaged, the mitochondria respond with this huge burst of oxidative stress to call in apoptosis or stem cells or whatever healing needs to happen, versus a healthy cell that gets the same wireless communication network up and running. Instead of increasing it, it actually decreases that oxidative stress in the cell, extends life in those cells by 15% in our cultures and everything else. So it's this really cool state of affairs where Restore is literally a passive agent, whereas your humics and fulvics and your shilajit, these are very active things that are trying to add a bunch of mineral to a substrate that might go on to bind things down the pathway of synthesis down one receptor pathway or another. Restore doesn't have any action intended to be receptor based.
Okay, so when we increase the mitochondrial function, we increase the cellular communication, then as the gut microbiome is improved, then other therapies would be improved. So one of the things that we like to give our patients a lot of times is what they call glucan 300. And it is a polysaccharide that has been very shown in clinical studies to improve the immune system function. In fact, now understanding this concept of Restore, that if we can restore that gut cellular function, then its response even to something like a polysaccharide, like a 1,3-D beta glucan, it would be very important. So I would encourage all the listeners to go to purebetabglucan.com and understand and look up glucan 300. And now if you understand, it's like if you've been taking that product and say, how else can I make this work better, is by actually looking at using something, if the gut is leaky or you're having exposure to glyphosate. These are things that we can synergistically look, just like when people take vitamins and minerals or they're eating plant-based foods, we have to look at improving the absorption, digestion, assimilation on the core level of cellular function in the mitochondria of the gut. Otherwise, some of these things are just kind of going right through us or not getting the full benefit.
Yeah, especially considering the immune function that's in the gut. It's huge, right?
Precisely. Yeah, that's right. So 60 to 70% of your immune system is sitting right behind that gut lining, making about 80% of the antibodies that will affect your overall response to the environment. And so antibodies, again, are little proteins that are formed by your immune system cells, these big factories called B cells. And the B cells will crank out these antibodies to one specific enemy or target. And so they're kind of like the smart bomb of the immune system, where they'll find an antigen or some foreign material, and they'll move in and target that thing to try to get it out of your body. So that could be a process of trying to clear mitochondria damaged mitochondria, damaged cells. It could be trying to clean up damaged immune tissue itself, macrostructures of proteins damaged. So you can create an antibody just about anything. And unfortunately, if you start to erode that whole front line of your gut membrane and start to overwhelm your immune system with every bite of food you take, every drink of water you take, every breath of air you take, because remember, your sinuses are the beginning of your gut. And so the same tight junctions are holding together. So you take a breath and you've got glyphosate in the air. 75% of our air is contaminated with glyphosate now. 75% of our rainfall is contaminated with glyphosate. So we are leaking all over the place, and now we're overwhelming our body. The reality is we have lost our self-identity at the cell level because of this. And so think about that for a moment, both at the microscopic level, but think about your own life, your questions you ask yourself in a day. What is my purpose? Why am I here? Those moments of desperation, moments of the blues, the moments of real depression that can hit all of us. And then you look at the school shootings, and you look at the rhetoric that happens among our politicians and everything else. Like, there is just a general state of inflammation that is so evident on the macro as well as the microscopic level. We're losing our self-identity at the core of this because of this erosion of the tight junctions. And so our immune system is reacting to everything,
Right. Everything is becoming a hyper responsive, overreacting. So after this next break, we will actually talk about now how to use Restore and how it might be used with other things, and provide you the solutions so that we are not causing more dysfunction, more inflammation. And again, people go to inflammationnation.com. You can understand some of the background of this, and also go to zachbushmd.com as well. We'll be right back after the short messages from our sponsors.
You're clear.
Okay. All right, everybody on Facebook, I think this is an exciting, enjoyable. I'm really enjoying this, Zach, by the way.
Great.
It's great because and depressing at the same time.
Because we always talk about cellular function with our patients. We always talk. I just gave a lecture yesterday at a health symposium here in New Mexico, and as a keynote, and we're just talking about foods, and everybody gets kind of grumpy when you talk about healthy food, healthy environment, and all. But it's really key, because we're all getting bombarded on so many levels, and if we can't protect ourselves and plan and prepare, I always say you gotta wear a helmet, you gotta wear a Kevlar vest. You just can't walk out in the middle of a war and not think you're going to get shot. And so we have to guide our patients and guide people, saying, hey, you don't have to be perfect, but you have to make better choices, better decisions every single day of what you put in your body, what you put in your mouth, what are you breathing, and even the people around you.
Put in your brain what you're looking at every day.
That's right. Yeah, it's exactly right. And I think that you've also got a situation where you've got people asking the question of, why am I feeling bad on health food? Why am I feeling bad despite all of my efforts? And part of it is a release of responsibility here, in that, there's a toxin in your environment that is saturated your life and your child's life. And you're seeing the eczema and the allergies and the asthma and the cancer and the heart disease and the major depression, the insomnia, the sexual dysfunction, all of that, epidemics that are happening around us is not, just happening because of the food you're putting in your mouth. But on the other hand, it amps up the responsibility for every single one of us here, and that we created Monsanto.
Right.
Monsanto didn't create itself. It would have never had a business
20 seconds.
if we wanted to keep growing our own food. So that's the reality.
Right. And I think, what we like to do is we like to encourage activism, and democracy on any level right now would be helpful.
Especially using your dollar bill.
Vote and shop accordingly.
You are tuned in to Take Back Your Health. To reach our program today, call 1-866-472-5792. That's 1-866-472-5792. Or by email to radio@sanjevani.net. That's radio@sanjevani.net. Now, let's return to Take Back Your Health.
Wow, what a great show this has been with Dr. Zach Bush, I would say founder and owner and inventor or discoverer of Restore. And we've really been talking about, important aspect of glyphosate toxicity, which is completely in our environment. It's a decusant, it's a chemical from Monsanto that's put on, all sorts of plants and animals, foods. And importantly, when we see Zach, we're telling patients to go plant-based. We see a lot of patients come in with ketogenic paleo diets, not understanding that the bioaccumulation of those toxins are now even highly amplified, because the animals eating the corn, it's eating the soy, it's eating the alfalfa that's been heavily sprayed in, so that they're even more toxic. So their gut not only topping from an inflammatory food standpoint with no fiber, no antioxidants, no phytonutrient standpoint, but now we're adding even more insult, having more of these kind of chemicals in those proteins. So
imagine what the poor fish are eating: plastic, fertilizer, everything.
Well, that's resulting in the dead zones, right? And so we have the Mississippi River. We have a dead zone that's larger than the state of Rhode Island now. We have annihilated life at the end of the Mississippi River. We are concentrating the glyphosate from thousands and thousands of square miles of agricultural land into the tributaries of the Mississippi, pouring those out into the Mississippi Delta, and it's annihilated life out there. And so, it's happening, in Australia. I was just snorkeling the Great Barrier Reef this past summer, and it's just tragic what's happened in just a few years.
It's
billions of years old, right?
I know.
Right. I've been there. I know.
And millions of years of
and I think they just approved for like bombing and drilling or oil rigging. And this is like, people don't understand that affects the whole ecosystems of the entire planet. And so same thing with the microbiome, we're all the microcosm, macrocosm relationship. So when something else is in the ocean is dying, that eventually comes around and bites us.
Like the butterfly effect.
The butterfly effect, as we call it, right?
Yeah.
So explain to the listeners a little bit. Okay, Restore is a liquid, and it comes in a bottle. And how are they supposed to take this? And when do you recommend? Just general recommendations, obviously, with improving those tight junctions.
Great. Yeah, so this is a liquid supplement. It's a dietary supplement that's really falls into a new category. It's much different than a probiotic in that it's sterile. There's no bacteria, fungi, et cetera in it. It's really just this wireless communication network supported by a few amino acids and mineral salts in there. And so you've got this substrate in a liquid form now that is going to be bolstering up the communication network across your gut barrier and beyond. And so in this situation, it's not too confusing that you would be wanting to take this ideally before meals or at least with your meal to help support the gut lining as you start to ingest glyphosate. One of the startling things is we're seeing study after study, including in our own labs, of clinical patients coming in to be studied. And even if they're eating organic food strictly in the home, you're seeing glyphosate in their urine. 100% of them have Roundup in their urine. And so that glyphosate ever presence means that you've got to be prepared for that meal. So taking this in with each meal, and then if you forget with the meal, you can always take it after the meal. We've shown the benefit after as well as before, but obviously less energy to prevent than Restore. So we're a big fan of Restore before the meals and then keep that cranking. I mentioned already that the sinuses are the beginning of your gut. And so we also have a nasal spray that really works with the microbiome and the tight junction system of those nasal sinuses. This is actually really your entry point for the supplement. If you're very suspicious and you think Zach might be a complete quack, then I'd say go after the nasal spray because you're going to know in 2 days that this stuff works.
Absolutely.
Very quick to work on the nasal membranes, and you're going to start to experience, you can sensate the nasal membranes, your congestion, your postnasal drainage, your sneezing, your reactivity to your environment. That can diminish in just a matter of minutes, literally, from your first usage. And so you're going to see this innate ability for your body to go back into a healthy barrier system of the outside world with the nasal. That can give you just a premonition of what's happening in your gut when you're taking the oral, because it can be less obvious.
How long can someone take Restore, or what's the average recommended? Like someone just has, food allergies, leaky gut, or maybe a little bit of a serious condition like a Crohn's disease. When you see someone just with just general IBS problems and stuff like that, is it how long do they take? Because I know it comes in different size bottles, and it comes. I like to use the pump because it's easy to measure. The 5 ml, 1 teaspoon.
Yep.
How long do you recommend, or how long have you seen in your clinical practice people using it and then starting to see, wow, I noticed some of these changes?
We had really hoped when we set out that, it might be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. We thought that surely there's some point where you get enough of your microbiome back. And we didn't know it was going to do that at first because, again, this is a sterile compound. Right. But as soon as we put this into clinical trials, we saw people recovering bowel flora and bulk of organic material in their gut that they hadn't had in decades. And so there was immediate restoration, which means this is functioning not just as a communication network, but also as like a compost material to bring the microbiome back in. And the microbiome is now speaking with a clear wireless communication network up and going. So if you've got overgrown weeds, they're going to pull back and allow for the ecosystem to restore. And you can see this in a garden. You clear cut a piece of soil, weeds crop up, but then they're going to back off and allow the tree sprouts to come up. An ecosystem knows how to recover when it's unperturbed. Your gut knows how to recover its ecosystem, which is so complicated. There's no probiotic on earth that can micromanage your gut ecosystem. It's too many species, too many connections to change season to season. Temperatures should change it. Your emotions should change it. Your menstrual cycle should change your microbiome from week to week, month to month. So this chronic use of probiotics is really dumbing down the system. And this is the opposite.
Yeah, we call it, we said monocropping, or the idea is that we like to use the probiotics when people have cancer, when they have chemotherapies, surgeries, antibiotics, IBS are having just a lot of, but the problem is the lack of diversity. And so the key is what I think what most of the future we'll be looking at with gut health is how do we because we have thousands and thousands and thousands of species, and we only have 40 commercially available, for example. We provide 12 of, say, 50 billion, 100 billion, but that's just a small drop in this ocean. And so other things that can help improve the growth and the sustainability of all the other microflora in the gut is key in keeping the tight junction strong through this product called Restore, which is safe, natural, and has been clinically tested in publications out there. And this is what we're looking at, is evidence-based data. These are not drugs. These are natural products that you can recommend. I'm going to recommend everybody to go to the website, www.Sanjevani Store, SANJEVANI store.com, and if you enter promo code PI, you can get a discount, or you can go to zachbushmd.com as well as the Restore website as well, and enter promo code PI. You go to it's restore4, the number 4 life.com, and enter promo code PI. Hopefully you get a discount as well. Either way, come back to our websites. We have wonderful products you can get there. The Glucan 300, the Pure Black. We have the Bosmeric, and now we'll be adding to our store for you to restore your health is a wonderful product by our colleague and friend, Zach Bush. Zach, I appreciate you coming today, spending time with us, giving us a brief but important discussion on microbiome and how that affects not only our cells and our gut, but our emotional health, our physical health, our inflammatory health, our immune health, and just health for everybody in general.
Thank you guys both for having me on. It's been wonderful. All of you listening, make sure you get back out to Mother Nature. She's going to rebuild that microbiome for you.
Good. And everybody, until next week, take care and best of health.
You're clear.
Okay, so we're on Facebook Live. We have a few more minutes, so if anybody wants to send us a question or so, Zach, if you want to talk about anything else open to the Facebook Live listeners, go ahead. I know I want to just basically say we can't disclose it fully, but Zach and I are going to be on hopefully an interesting project coming soon. We can't say because we're under non-disclosure agreements, but there might be some innovative TV program coming out, and it'll be great because what Zach and I and everybody looking at is other things and tools to help people kind of be innovators and really help change this planet. And I think it's not just a natural product, but it's looking at how can we support innovation in industry. Zach, probably you came to this probably by chance. It wasn't something like, hey, I'm going to be a triple board certified doctor, learn about nutrition later on, and then come and talk about some kind of soil content product for the gut microbiome. We all end up in places because of our own story, our own journey, and I really appreciate Zach's kind of coming to this place via his own. A lot of people are popping into integrative medicine, holistic medicine, just because they want to be famous, or they want to write a book. I was talking about, yesterday I was at the conference and people were talking about the plant paradox and the lectins, and I was like, we got to be worried about someone who just automatically just comes out with an idea after being in OR for 10,000 surgeries, thinking that they discovered something that people have been researching or looking at and have missed. No, it's from our experience of looking at in cell culture and animal culture in our clinical practice, and actually looking at what's evidence-based and published is key. So I can't say enough good things about how I feel what the work that you do, because it's always about pushing the limits. On our side, just to let you know, as an integrative practice, we've been doing this for 18 years, so that we always look at studies. So when we talk about products, we like to use targeted things. We like to look at things that we actually can show and demonstrate. Is there benefits? Is there safe? Is it effective? Is it natural? And then kind of ignore the hype, because once you come out with the product, someone else on Facebook will have a bigger splash, a bigger thing. And our goal is to always go back and reemphasize, look, there has to be data to show safety, efficacy, purity, potency. And if you do that, then that's when the true benefits occur. And that's why I appreciate all the work that you have done and put into your products, and even your reputation in just talking about microbiome.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. It's lovely to be with you guys. Excited for each of you listening to be a part of the conversation, because the further I get down this avenue of research, and we're shooting a documentary film along the Mississippi River right now, and interviewing a ton of farmers who are working their asses off right now to try to figure out some sort of solution for this nation. And they are so over a barrel financially, and they have been bankrupted by the chemical companies, and it is a desperate affair. And so all of you can really change the world the fastest and the most powerfully, I think, by getting in touch with your local farmers. So go beyond the supplements and really re-engage with your food. Know a CSA farmer, go out to the CSAs on the weekends, help them prepare their soils for the coming year, understand what healthy soil looks like, get engaged with, your local farmers market, get engaged with your legislative bodies. We have got to change this on so many avenues so fast, but you two really hit on it, which is your most powerful vote is your dollar. And by eating organic, you're certainly voting in a powerful way to say, let these farmers get back to growing real food again. But then you've got to go further, because I can tell you that organic production right now is not where you want it to be. If you've been following the story, we just got permission to call hydroponically grown vegetables and fruits organic. This is a bit of a disaster when you start to think about the nutrient quality of your food. It's one thing not to have as many pesticides and herbicides on there. Right. It's a totally different thing to actually have the medicines and the actual nutrients in the food that you would expect it to have. Those are not going to be coming out of your hydroponically grown compound. So get real in touch with your food. The best case scenario, of course, is grow it in your backyards. If you live in an apartment, you don't have a yard, grow one plant in your window, one tomato plant, one mint plant. If you kill everything, if you're a brown thumb, grow mint. It'll live forever.
So, one of the things that we've been doing here for 15 years is that we have a CSA, and and they deliver a box of, and people now everything's online. They can pick how much they want in the box and different things. It's also, and they trade within 4 state different co-ops, and it's really about pushing, because a lot of people complain that organic food's expensive. It's expensive if you're going to whole paycheck store and buying something that's nicely displayed as if it's, some kind of jewels or fancy watch in a Vegas store. It's like, no, we're talking about apples and oranges and squash and zucchinis and potatoes, tomatoes.
Remember those?
All those things need to be organic. And more importantly, when it comes right out from the farm, it's really inexpensive. People have no idea how cheap it is to eat healthy. It's just that we've forgotten how to cook.
And by using your local CSA, then you're also eating seasonally. So you're coming back to your own biorhythm as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, the root vegetables are probably, some of the most underutilized in our entire nutrient field right now. We are so used to going and getting fresh kale and blueberries and raspberries at every single season. That stuff's being shipped a whole hell of a long ways from Chile or the likes in the middle of winter. And so getting back in touch with your rutabaga, the incredible beet, it's just such a powerhouse. Your turnips, the radishes are extraordinary. The daikon radish is that giant white carrot looking thing on the grocery store shelf. The black radishes are underutilized. The classic red radish has got a lot of utility to it as well. And then, of course, like you mentioned, we've forgotten how to cook. The herbs are incredible. You get cilantro and parsley and turmeric and all these compounds that are used the world over still. And yet, as Americans, we're down to salt and pepper and some salsa, and we call it, food.
Right. And,
and ketchup is our vegetable.
It's interesting because we're so separated from food. When we get our patients to go, they usually get their first box delivered from the CSA truck, and they will either call us or email like, what is this? Because you get the whole, like you said, the radish or the beet with the whole stalk.
Especially like a kohlrabi. Have you ever seen a kohlrabi? Everybody goes, what the heck is that?
Like, what is that? Because everything we get is like sliced, it's cut, it's canned, it's already shaved and everything, and they never see that. Like, hey, you know what? You can even eat the leaves off of this. You can even chop the stems and cook with that. And so it's kind of like reinventing and reintroducing ourselves to food and understanding how food is medicine. And we're going to be doing a retreat in August in Curacao, Food is Medicine Retreat. And so it's something that, that we're always looking at. How do we go back to the basics again?
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on all the work you guys have done over the years there. I love the New Mexico area, and I was just in Santa Fe, just missed you there, but
good.
Great community that you guys have built there. And so thank you for getting the words out.
Sure. And next time you're here, we will definitely catch up, and we'll catch up with you soon on that secret project of ours. Hopefully it will take off and we can help start changing the world.
I love it.
Thank you so much for being with us, Zach. We really appreciate it.
A real pleasure. To all of you listening, enjoy your life and the kids, and let's eat it up.
Good. Thanks, Zach. Talk to you later. All right, everybody. Best of health, and see you next week.